Billionaire was cheating. While his pregnant wife was in labor, she left him right after delivery. A hush fell over the opulent corridors of the Lockwood estate the night Evelyn went into labor. In a mansion brimming with marble floors and sparkling chandeliers, no one could have anticipated the storm of betrayal that would shatter its polished facade. Whispers trickled through the hallway, something about Thomas Lockwood, the millionaire heir of a wealthy family, disappearing at the very moment his wife needed him most. The staff exchanged knowing looks, unsettled by the glaring absence of the proud husband who was supposed to be by Evelyn's side. What happened that night would become the spark that ignited a spectacular downfall and a dramatic escape. Evelyn Morgan had grown up modestly in Fairview, a small coastal town known for its picturesque seafront and local artisan shops. She never imagined that, one day, she would marry into the Lockwood family, one of the most illustrious and wealthy clans in the entire state. In that quaint beachside community, her world revolved around local fairs, family dinners, and the dream of becoming a painter. She was shy, but had a gentle spirit. Anyone who met her couldn't help but warm up to her kindness. Thomas Lockwood, the charismatic son of Richard and Marion Lockwood, had always lived in a rarefied bubble. Born with privilege at his fingertips, he moved in circles where exclusive country clubs and high-end galas were as familiar to him as the corner cafe was to regular folk. He had the sharp features and polished charm that many found irresistible. When he visited Fairview on a whim one summer, drawn by an art festival where some of the region's budding talents showcased their work, he stumbled upon Evelyn painting a serene beachscape at her tiny stall. Her painting, though simple, reflected a profound understanding of color and emotion that drew him in. She was not just another face in the crowd, she was a breath of fresh air in his otherwise predictable upper-crust life. The budding romance between them was like something out of a fairy tale. Thomas courted her with a kind of lavish gestures that dazzled Evelyn five-star dinners overlooking the sea, expensive art supplies to encourage her craft, and even a surprise helicopter ride so she could see the coastline from the skies. At first, Evelyn was overwhelmed by the extravagance, yet she found herself enamored by Thomas's sweet words and apparent devotion. Within a whirlwind year, the pair married at the Lockwood estate, a grand affair where high society rubbed shoulders with a few of Evelyn's humble hometown friends. After the wedding, Evelyn tried to adjust to the Lockwood way of life. The mansion boasted a marble foyer, each tile imported from different exotic locales, lit by crystal chandeliers that flickered like 1,000 tiny diamonds. The mansion had a staff of 15 cooks, maids, gardeners, and drivers. The Lockwood name was practically etched in gold across every luxurious corner. It was an entirely different world than she'd known, and sometimes she felt intimidated by its sheer scale. Yet Thomas appeared attentive, guiding her through complex social events, introducing her to well-connected individuals, and even funding a small art studio for her so she could keep painting. But in those earliest days, Evelyn couldn't ignore the subtle tension lurking beneath the polished surface. Thomas's parents, Richard and Marion, while polite, exuded an air of disapproval. They had expected Thomas to marry someone from their social sphere, perhaps the sophisticated daughter of an ambassador or a prominent businessman. Evelyn's kindness didn't fully erase the lingering belief that she was too common for their precious son. In the corridors, behind closed doors, whispered conversations about Evelyn's background never truly died down. Thomas usually brushed off his parents' concerns, insisting he loved his wife. And for a time, Evelyn believed that love was enough. Then, a year into their marriage, Evelyn found out she was pregnant. News of the pregnancy could have become the glorious unifier, the key that would open her into the inner circle of the Lockwood clan. At first, the entire household celebrated. Marion gave Evelyn a half-hearted smile and offered to arrange for the best prenatal care money could buy. Richard patted Thomas on the back, beaming at the prospect of a future heir. Evelyn felt hopeful. She had always wanted a child, and the idea of bringing a baby into this grand estate gave her a new sense of purpose. Thomas, too, seemed happy about fatherhood, at least on the surface. He took Evelyn to lavish doctor's appointments, hired a specialized nutritionist to cater to her every craving, and insisted on the best doctors for her care. He even had an entire wing of the mansion renovated to serve as the nursery, bringing in top interior designers to craft a whimsical yet lavish space for their soon-to-be child. Pastel walls, state-of-the-art cribs, imported plush carpets from Persia, mobiles made of pearls, and custom artwork lined the walls. Everything was set to welcome the next generation of Lockwoods in the grandest manner possible. But as the months of pregnancy wore on, Evelyn began noticing changes in Thomas's behavior. He took increasingly frequent business trips, always justified with an urgent investment meeting in New York or a potential real estate opportunity in Dubai. In her delicate condition, Evelyn found it exhausting to keep pace with his hectic schedule. Whenever she tried to engage him in discussions about baby names or about the anxieties she had regarding childbirth, he always appeared distracted, fidgeting with his phone or glancing at the time. The staff, particularly Bianca, the head housekeeper, offered her kind words and tried to alleviate the loneliness with warm cups of herbal tea and gentle conversation. Still, the emptiness in that enormous mansion remained, looming and cold. The final straw came the night her contractions started. In that moment of dire need, Thomas was missing in action. As the staff hurried to get Evelyn into the car, to rush her to the hospital, everyone asked, "Where is Mr. Lockwood?" No one had an answer. Panic gripped Evelyn, but also a hollow sensation in her chest. The man she had married, the man she thought loved her above all else, was nowhere to be found despite receiving multiple urgent calls. The staff assumed he was tied up in a meeting or stuck in traffic, but no meeting should have been more important than the birth of his child. What no one in that mansion suspected, or perhaps some had quietly guessed, was the bitter truth. Thomas was in the arms of another woman. Before the fateful night of labor, whisperings had begun throughout the estate. Certain staff members had overheard hushed phone calls. Thomas made from his study. He'd lock the door, a habit he never had before. Afterward, his mood would be oddly upbeat, even buoyant, despite having just stepped out of what he claimed were tense boardroom discussions. Bianca, the sharp-eyed housekeeper, noticed how often he checked his phone during dinner or slipped out of Evelyn's side during parties. He brushed off any questions with, "I need to speak to the CFO," or "Our lawyer is calling me about the new property expansion." Evelyn, though, was blinded by her hope that pregnancy and the approaching birth would bring them closer. She chalked up his preoccupation to the stress of ensuring everything was financially stable for their child. After all, Thomas carried the weight of the Lockwood empire, and the economy, he'd say, was on shaky ground. But the more he distanced himself, the more a subtle dread grew in her heart. In that final trimester, Evelyn's belly was enormous, her ankles swollen, and her emotions on a constant roller coaster. She tried to approach Thomas one evening in the library, a stately room with towering shelves filled with first editions and rare manuscripts. The scent of old leather and polished mahogany was overwhelming. She told him about her nightmares, dreams of going into labor alone, with no one to help her. He nodded solemnly, kissed her forehead, and reassured her that he'd be there every step of the way. "I'd never leave your side in a moment like that," he promised. But Evelyn glimpsed how he clenched his phone in his hand, as though waiting for a text or a call. She saw the faintest trace of guilt flicker in his eyes, like a deer caught in headlights. A gnawing sense of unease took hold. That same night she overheard him talking in hushed tones over the phone. "I can't keep this up for long," he whispered. "Just be patient until after the baby's here." Evelyn's heart rattled in her ribcage. She considered confronting him, but she felt terrified of what she might discover. She was carrying his child, and if her worst fears proved true, how would she endure it? A few days before her due date, Thomas announced he had to take a day trip to Oakville, another city about 3 hours away by car, to finalize an important land acquisition. Evelyn pleaded with him to stay. She reminded him that the doctor predicted the baby could arrive any moment. "If anything happens," he said, "I'll be back in a flash. I'm just a few hours away. Don't worry." While he was gone, an unexpected visitor arrived at the mansion, Lauren Caldwell, an old acquaintance from Thomas's prep school days. She was tall, with sleek black hair and a commanding presence that seemed to fill any room she entered. She flashed a polite smile, explaining to the house staff that she was an old friend of Thomas's, passing through town. No one recognized her, but given her impeccable designer outfit and poised demeanor, the staff politely escorted her to the sitting room, offering tea and biscuits. Evelyn, well into her 3rd trimester, was resting in her bedroom when Bianca informed her of Miss Caldwell's arrival. The name instantly made Evelyn uneasy. She had once seen it flash on Thomas's phone. He had claimed it was a business contact. Why would a mere business contact show up unannounced? Warily, Evelyn descended the grand staircase, her footsteps slow and heavy from carrying her large belly. She found Lauren sitting on a velvet couch in the lavish sitting room, calmly sipping tea and admiring the gilded art on the walls. Upon seeing Evelyn, Lauren rose and smiled. It was a peculiar smile, elegant yet somehow condescending. She introduced herself as a longtime friend, going on about how she just had to see Thomas because she was considering investing in a new venture. Evelyn tried her best to remain gracious, but something about Lauren's tone grated on her. Her words seemed carefully chosen to drop hints about the closeness she shared with Thomas. "This is quite the home, Evelyn," Lauren remarked, glancing around with feigned awe. "Thomas always spoke so highly of you. He said you were his rock, especially now, with the baby coming. But I'm sure it must be stressful for him, handling so many responsibilities." Evelyn felt a sting. Stressful for him? She mentally refuted that notion. What about her own stress? She was the one carrying the child. Before she could fire back, Lauren placed her teacup down with a gentle clink and added, "I'll have to catch him next time. My schedule is very tight, and I'm traveling to Europe soon. Please tell him I stopped by. I'm staying at the Lakeview Hotel in Oakville for a few days. He knows where to find me." Evelyn's suspicion solidified the moment Lauren left. Why would Thomas's so-called school friend be staying in Oakville, the exact place Thomas claimed to be traveling to for his so-called business trip? How did she know his schedule so intimately? Evelyn felt her stomach twist, not from the baby's movement, but from dread. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she held back, fearing that the truth would be more painful than her imagination. Thomas returned home late that night, smelling of cologne that wasn't his usual brand. A faint trace of perfume clung to his jacket, something far too floral and sweet. When Evelyn confronted him about Lauren's visit, he shrugged. "She's just an old friend. We crossed paths recently at a charity event. She heard we're expecting a baby and wanted to drop by with her best wishes. Nothing more." Evelyn didn't know which was worse, his refusal to elaborate or the emptiness in his eyes that hinted at some deeper secret. 2 days later, the contractions began. It happened at midnight. Evelyn was jolted awake by a sharp pain slicing through her lower abdomen. She gasped, clutching her belly. The baby wasn't due for another week, but the little one apparently had other plans. Sweat beaded on her forehead as wave after wave of pain coursed through her. She tried to call out for Thomas, but he wasn't in bed. Heart pounding, she managed to grab her phone from the nightstand and dialed his number. It rang endlessly, finally going to voicemail. Panicking, Evelyn pressed the button beside her bed that summoned Bianca. The housekeeper rushed in, eyes wide with alarm. Within minutes, the rest of the staff scrambled to prepare a car to drive Evelyn to the hospital. They searched the house for Thomas, but he was nowhere. One of the maids said she noticed him leaving around 11 p.m. just for a short drive. No one questioned it then, as Thomas often came and went at odd hours for business. But tonight, business or not, the timing was catastrophic. Evelyn clenched her teeth through the contractions, tears streaming down her face. In the back of the town car, she tried Thomas's phone repeatedly, each time only hearing a recorded message. Fear and betrayal simmered within her. She couldn't fathom how he could be unreachable on the night she needed him most. At the hospital, nurses and doctors swiftly took over. The labor was intense and complicated. The baby appeared to be in slight distress, its heartbeat erratic. The doctors recommended an immediate move to the operating theater for a potential emergency C-section if matters worsened. Surrounded by bright lights and the sterile smell of disinfectant, Evelyn felt terror at the edges of her consciousness. She was alone in this cold environment, except for the medical professionals doing their best to care for her. No friend, no family, no devoted husband's hand to squeeze. She thought back to Fairview, how her mother had always promised to stay by her side during childbirth. But that mother had passed away 2 years ago, leaving Evelyn with only her father, who lived states away and was in ill health. She had thought Thomas would fill that role. 4 excruciating hours later, Evelyn gave birth to a baby girl, red-faced and wailing, but otherwise healthy. The doctors handed her the tiny, wriggling form swaddled in a pink blanket. Overwhelming love and relief coursed through her, coupled with an even stronger sense of desolation. She gazed at the infant's blinking eyes and she whispered, "You're not alone. Mummy's here." Yet in her heart a question lingered. Where was Thomas? It wasn't until 7 in the morning that Thomas finally appeared at the hospital. His hair was disheveled, shirt partially unbuttoned, and the stench of stale alcohol on his breath. The nurse at the reception desk gave him a reproachful glance, but said nothing. When he stumbled into Evelyn's room, he attempted to look worried and contrite, but his excuse-laden words tumbled out sloppily. I lost my phone," he stammered, eyes darting around as though searching for an escape from Evelyn's accusing gaze. "Had a work-related gathering that dragged on. I didn't realize you'd gone into labor until it was too late." Evelyn's eyes, usually so gentle, blazed with fury. "You missed the birth of your daughter," she said, her voice trembling. The baby, held in her arms, began to wail, sensing the tension. "How could you not answer? How could you not even be here?" Thomas tried to lean in and see the baby, but Evelyn pulled away. A nurse entered, checking on Evelyn's vitals, offering the new mother a moment to calm down. When they were alone again, Thomas tried to stroke the baby's cheek. Evelyn relented just enough to let him glimpse their daughter. He attempted a smile, but it looked forced. Evelyn didn't need an explanation to suspect the worst. She recalled the perfume smell on his jacket, Lauren's surprise visit, and those cryptic phone calls. Her anger pulsed with every beat of her heart. But she bit back the heated words that threatened to spill. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally. She decided to wait until she regained her strength before confronting him fully. For now, she needed rest and to protect her baby. The swirl of heartbreak in her chest promised that this was just the beginning of a world-shattering confrontation. 3 days passed. Evelyn and her newborn daughter, whom she named Clara, stayed in the hospital for observation. Thomas came and went, never staying for more than a couple of hours. He always claimed pressing business, but seldom answered calls in her presence. He kept the phone on silent or face down on a side table. Each time he left, Evelyn felt a spike of dread, her mind conjuring images of him racing off to see Lauren. She couldn't help the silent tears that sometimes rolled down her cheeks as she held little Clara in her arms. When Evelyn was finally discharged, Thomas insisted on having his driver bring them home. The ride back to the mansion was tense. The staff lined up to greet the new mother and baby, but the usual festive energy that accompanied a new heir felt muted. Rumors had spread everyone knew Thomas had missed the birth, and whispers circulated that he'd been seen in questionable company. Yet no one dared speak aloud in Evelyn's presence. They offered her gentle smiles and cooed over Clara, trying to lighten the heavy air. That night, when the baby was finally asleep, Evelyn cornered Thomas in the lavish nursery. A dim nightlight cast soft shadows across the pastel walls. She placed Clara in her crib, ensuring she was sound, then turned to face her husband. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried a ferocity that startled him. "Tell me where you were when I went into labor." Thomas shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet her gaze. "I told you. I was at a business dinner. Then I misplaced my phone. By the time I realized what was happening—" "Lies," she cut him off, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might wake the baby. "Lauren Caldwell visited here while you were away. She told me you knew where she was staying, and you just happened to be in the same town. Don't treat me like a fool." A long silence followed, broken only by the soft whir of the nursery's air conditioning. Evelyn could see the color draining from Thomas's face. His shoulders slumped in defeat. For a moment she saw flickers of genuine remorse. Then he cleared his throat. "Evelyn," he began, "Lauren and we reconnected at a charity gala months ago. Nothing was supposed to happen, I swear. It started out as friendship, catching up over old times. Then one thing led to another." Evelyn felt as though her stomach had been hollowed out. She steadied herself on the crib's edge. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long has this been going on?" Thomas swallowed hard. "A few months, maybe 6. It wasn't serious. It was just, I've been under so much pressure. My parents pushing me about the business, about heirs, and then the pregnancy stress. Lauren listened to me in ways I felt you couldn't." "Stop," Evelyn snapped. Her eyes glistened with tears, her entire body shaking. "Don't you dare blame me for your infidelity. I was pregnant with your child. I relied on you, trusted you. And you left me alone in the hospital while you were." She pressed her lips together, trying to suppress the rage. "You disgust me, Thomas." He reached out to touch her arm, but she recoiled. The wave of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak hit her so strongly she nearly lost her balance. Pain shot through her abdomen, lingering soreness from the birth. She winced. Thomas's eyes clouded with concern. "Evelyn, please, just give me a chance to explain." "It was a mistake. It won't happen again." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "The time for explanations is long gone. You betrayed me when I needed you most. I don't think I can ever forgive that." Before he could respond, Clara began to cry. Evelyn instinctively turned to pick her up, cradling the little girl against her chest. In that moment, Evelyn realized that her focus had to shift completely to her daughter's well-being. She couldn't let the toxic environment fester. She had given Thomas her love, her loyalty, and he had repaid her with deceit and abandonment. Now, the only person she wanted to protect was Clara. "I'm staying in the guest room," Evelyn said firmly, rocking Clara gently. "Don't come near me unless it's about the baby." "I need time to think." Thomas opened his mouth as though to protest, but the words died. He nodded, face drawn and haunted. Evelyn, baby in arms, walked out of the nursery, leaving Thomas standing alone in the soft glow of the nightlight, overshadowed by the consequences of his own betrayal. The next few days were an emotional whirlwind. Marion Lockwood, who had never been fully supportive of Evelyn, showed up at Evelyn's door the morning after the confrontation. She wore a pristine skirt suit and pearls, an outfit that radiated elegance and disapproval. "I heard there's been an incident," she said, glossing over the enormity of Thomas's infidelity with an icy poise. She paused, noticing Evelyn's tired, tear-stained eyes. "This is unfortunate. I'm sorry you had to go through something so upsetting right after giving birth." Evelyn felt a surge of fury at the woman's restrained tone. "You call my husband's affair an incident?" she asked bitterly, letting the implication linger. Marian pursed her lips but remained calm, glancing at Clara sleeping in her bassinet. "I don't condone his behavior," she said at last. "But a public scandal is the last thing this family needs. Thomas is at a crucial juncture with the company. Investors must not see any instability in the Lockwood household." "Do you understand what I'm saying, Evelyn?" Evelyn's jaw clenched. "So you want me to remain quiet? Pretend everything is fine? It's best for Clara," Marian replied, eyes flickering from the baby to Evelyn. "You know how divorces can be messy. Think of the child. The Lockwood name provides certain privileges. It would be wise not to burn bridges. If you need anything discreet therapy, a vacation, Thomas can arrange it. We can make sure you and Clara are well cared for financially." Evelyn's voice trembled with outrage. "You're essentially bribing me to stay silent and remain in a marriage built on deceit. That's what you think is best for Clara?" Marian's eyes narrowed. "Don't be naive, dear. Love is complicated. Marriage even more so. Thomas did something foolish, yes. But men in his position often stray. It's not ideal, but it's reality. Should you throw away all of this security, wealth, status for a single mistake?" Evelyn felt tears stinging her eyes. She forced them back, unwilling to show weakness in front of the matriarch, who had never truly accepted her. "It's not just a single mistake. He missed the birth of his child because he was with another woman. If that's not enough to walk away, I don't know what is." Marian studied her quietly, disappointment etched across her perfectly made-up features. "I see you won't be reasoned with at the moment. We'll talk again later." With that, she turned on her heel and swept out of the room, leaving a tense hush behind. Later that evening, Richard Lockwood approached Evelyn. Unlike Marian, he had always shown a softer side, though he remained somewhat distant, immersed in his own business dealings. He found Evelyn seated in the quiet courtyard garden, Clara asleep in a stroller beside her. Twilight cast long shadows across the manicured hedges and the stone fountain. "I won't defend Thomas," Richard said, standing beside the fountain's edge. The water gurgled softly, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Evelyn's heart. "What he did was shameful. You deserve better. But I hope you'll think carefully about any big decisions. Once you step away from the Lockwood family, it won't be easy to come back." Evelyn looked at him, her face etched with sorrow. "I don't want to come back to a marriage that's a lie." He nodded, gazing at the reflection of the moon in the water. "I respect that. But should you need anything, a place to stay, financial support, or help navigating the legal system, let me know. I'll see to it you're taken care of, no matter what Thomas says or does." She felt a swell of gratitude. Perhaps Richard's support was tinged with guilt over how Thomas had turned out. "Thank you," she whispered. Richard turned to leave, but hesitated. "Sometimes tragedies like this can be blessings in disguise," he murmured. "Focus on the baby and on yourself. The rest, time will unravel it." Evelyn nodded, tears silently falling. She stroked Clara's tiny fingers, her resolve growing stronger by the minute. In the midst of Evelyn's heartbreak, rumors surfaced that Thomas's affair with Lauren might not be his only indiscretion. One of the younger maids, Maria, came to Evelyn late one evening, trembling with anxiety. She confessed that she'd overheard Marian and Thomas in a heated discussion. Marian had demanded Thomas end all his dalliances, once and for all, plural. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "How many?" she asked Maria, voice shaky. The maid simply shook her head, tears in her eyes, refusing to elaborate further. But from that moment on, Evelyn suspected that Thomas's betrayal was bigger than a single fling. The thought sickened her. How long had she been living under a veneer of marital bliss while Thomas indulged in countless affairs behind her back? Had her entire marriage been a sham? Determined to find answers, Evelyn began searching Thomas's study. She knew it was risky, violating his privacy, or as the Lockwoods would phrase it, sticking her nose where it didn't belong. But her anger and desperation spurred her on. She rifled through drawers, scanning bank statements, credit card bills, and phone records. It was late, almost midnight, and the mansion was quiet. She heard only the occasional distant footstep of a security guard making rounds. Finally, after an hour of fruitless searching, she found a hidden drawer beneath one of the lower shelves. Inside were hotel receipts, expensive suites booked under Thomas's name, some in Oakville, some in even more distant cities. Some receipts went back a year or more. There were also printed email correspondences. She leafed through them, heart pounding. The language was flirtatious, even explicit, and they weren't only from Lauren Caldwell. There were at least 2 other names, Cassandra White and Felicia Herman. Evelyn's fingers shook so badly she could hardly hold the papers. An avalanche of betrayal descended upon her. The man she married had systematically and repeatedly deceived her. She wondered if any of his emotions for her had ever been genuine. Suddenly, the door to the study swung open. Thomas stood there, his face darkening when he saw Evelyn hunched over the incriminating papers. "What are you doing?" he demanded, voice low with anger. Evelyn rose, clutching the receipts in her hand. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was resolute. "Finding out the truth. How could you do this to me? To Clara?" Thomas tried to grab the papers, but Evelyn yanked them away. "Evelyn, listen," he started, as though he could still salvage the situation. "Those are from a long time ago. They mean nothing." She shook her head, tears spilling over. "Stop lying. I saw the dates. Some are during my pregnancy, others from even before we got married. You've been cheating on me for months, years. Is anything about our relationship real?" He took a step toward her, but Evelyn stepped back, pressing herself against the desk. Her heart thundered, a mix of fury and heartbreak. Thomas's voice softened with desperation. "I never meant for you to get hurt. It was I got bored, okay? I guess I was seeking excitement. But you have to believe me. I love you and Clara. I planned on stopping all of this once the baby arrived." Evelyn stared at him in disbelief, bored. "Are we so meaningless to you that you'd risk everything for cheap thrills? And you planned on stopping? You missed your own child's birth because you were with Lauren. That was your idea of stopping." He tried to speak again, but words failed him. Evelyn's chest constricted with heartbreak. Her eyes burned with tears. She thought back to the earliest days in Fairview, how sweet and attentive Thomas had been. Had that all been an act? Or had wealth and privilege corroded him from the inside, turning him into a man she no longer recognized? Papers in hand, Evelyn shoved past him. "Stay away from me," she hissed, her voice cracking with anguish. She left the study, feeling a swirl of emotions: betrayal, anger, sadness, but also a sense of clarity. She knew in that instant that there was no repairing what Thomas had broken. In the wake of her discovery, Evelyn felt an urgent need to leave the Lockwood estate. She couldn't envision a future raising her daughter in a house plagued by deceit and heartbreak. Yet leaving the Lockwood fortress wasn't a simple matter. The estate was guarded by security. Her every movement was tracked by staff, and she had no personal finances of her own. Thomas had insisted early in their marriage that he would handle the finances, with the false reassurance that she needn't worry her pretty head about money. Now, it left her trapped. She thought of her father, Henry Morgan, who lived states away in a modest retirement community. He had health problems, and she didn't want to burden him. Still, he was the only family she had left. She called him in secret, her voice trembling as she explained what had happened. Henry was outraged, vowing to do whatever it took to help her, but he was also financially limited. All he could offer was a small sum of savings and the emotional support of a father who adored his daughter. Evelyn also confided in Bianca, the head housekeeper who'd always shown her kindness. One afternoon, while Thomas was away on business, Evelyn walked through the manicured rose garden to meet Bianca near the tool shed. The sweet scent of roses clashed with the heaviness of the conversation. "I want to leave," Evelyn whispered, glancing around to ensure no one else was listening. "But I don't know how. They keep the gates locked. They track everything I spend." Bianca's eyes filled with concern. "Miss Lockwood, Evelyn, I can help you, but it's risky. If Mr. Lockwood or his mother finds out I assisted, they'll fire me, possibly worse." Evelyn's desperation spilled out. "Please, I can't stay here anymore. I won't raise Clara in this environment. I need to get out. I'll find a lawyer. I'll divorce Thomas and start over. I just need a way." Bianca took a deep breath. "I've worked for this family for 12 years. I've seen what they can do when threatened. You must be careful. If you leave abruptly, they may cut you off, threaten you with custody battles. But if you're determined, then I'll do what I can. I have a cousin who's a paralegal in the city. She might be able to recommend a good divorce attorney and help file papers quietly. As for actually leaving the estate, I could distract security while you slip out with Clara. But you'll need a plan for where to go." Evelyn closed her eyes, tears of relief pooling. "Thank you," she whispered. "Any help you can give me, I'll be forever grateful." Bianca gave her a quick hug, both women tense with the enormity of what they were planning. They decided to wait for the perfect moment, perhaps a day when Thomas and Marion were out at a major event and Richard was tied up in business negotiations. In the meantime, Bianca's cousin, Lucy, would start gathering information on reputable divorce lawyers who could handle a high-profile case. Over the next few days, Evelyn played the part of the dutiful wife in front of the staff and Thomas's parents, at least outwardly. She kept her emotions locked down, speaking only about Clara's health or trivial household matters. When Thomas tried to approach her with apologies or excuses, she offered cold, one-word replies. She refused to share a bedroom with him, moving all her belongings to the guest suite next to the nursery. She was done being gaslit by his half-truths. Unbeknownst to Thomas, Evelyn was secretly packing small suitcases for herself and Clara, hiding them in a locked trunk in the guest suite. She kept only the bare essentials, planning to rely on Lucy's advice to sort out finances later. The adrenaline of planning her escape propelled her forward, though fear still gnawed at her. What if Thomas discovered her plan? Would he try to take Clara away? She knew the Lockwood family had the money and power to wage a vicious custody battle. Yet the thought of staying was worse. She would not sentence herself and her daughter to an endless cycle of betrayal. Each night, when Clara's soft breathing lulled her to sleep, Evelyn pictured a future far from the gilded cages of the Lockwood estate. Maybe she'd return to Fairview, open a little art studio, and raise her daughter by the sea. Or maybe she'd move somewhere entirely new, forging a life free from the shadows of her failed marriage. The fear and uncertainty were daunting, but a flicker of hope glimmered. Perhaps, at last, she could reclaim her own identity, Evelyn Morgan, independent mother, artist, and survivor. One evening, as luck would have it, Thomas, Richard, and Marion were invited to a high-profile fundraiser across town. It was precisely the opportunity Evelyn and Bianca had been waiting for. Marion, in her usual imperious tone, mentioned they'd likely be gone most of the night, hobnobbing with politicians and philanthropists. Before leaving, Thomas hesitated at Evelyn's doorway, as though wanting to talk. but she pretended to be engrossed in feeding Clara. With a reluctant sigh, he departed, the heavy front door closing behind him. Bianca acted swiftly. She had arranged for a sympathetic driver, one of the few staffers not fully loyal to the Lockwoods, to prepare a car at a discreet side entrance. While the rest of the household staff believed Evelyn was simply putting Clara down for the night, Bianca stood watch. She texted Evelyn the all-clear signal. Evelyn felt her heart hammer as she gently placed Clara in a baby carrier, grabbed the small suitcases, and crept down the back stairwell. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, each step echoing in her ears. If she were caught, the repercussions could be dire. But she kept moving, spurred by the memory of Thomas's betrayals and the promise of a new life. At the side entrance, the driver quickly loaded the luggage and opened the back door. Bianca hovered close by, tears in her eyes. "I wish you all the best, Evelyn," she whispered, leaning in for a quick hug. "Lucy has arranged a hotel room for you. She'll meet you there with the legal documents. Please take care." Evelyn's throat was tight with emotion. She squeezed Bianca's hand. "Thank you for everything. I'll never forget your kindness." With that, Evelyn slid into the car. She cradled Clara, who cooed softly, unaware of the life-altering moment unfolding around her. The driver navigated the winding roads leading away from the Lockwood estate. Evelyn watched the silhouette of the mansion fade into the distance, its majestic spires and golden lights receding like a memory she was determined to leave behind. As they drove toward the city, Evelyn reflected on the turning points that had led her here. Thomas's empty promises, Lauren Caldwell's smug smile, the neglected phone calls during labor, and the damning evidence of multiple affairs. She felt sadness for the naive girl she had once been, who believed marrying Thomas would be a fairy tale. Yet amid the sorrow, a budding sense of liberation emerged. She and Clara were forging their own path now. They arrived at the modest but clean hotel near downtown. Lucy was waiting in the lobby, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a stack of folders clutched under her arm. She gave Evelyn a sympathetic nod, then guided her to a small room on the second floor. Inside, Lucy went through the immediate legal options. Evelyn could file for divorce on grounds of adultery, or she could simply file on irreconcilable differences. Either way, Lucy insisted they get a restraining order lined up in case the Lockwoods tried to force her back. "That family is powerful," Lucy said, flipping through documents. "But the law still protects you, especially if you can prove Thomas's infidelity and absence during the birth. Judges don't look kindly on that." Evelyn felt a lump in her throat. "I just want to make sure Clara stays with me. I'd never keep her away from Thomas if he wanted to be a decent father, but I can't let them use their influence to take her." Lucy gave a determined smile. "We'll make sure you and your daughter are safe." That night, after filling out endless paperwork, Evelyn fed Clara, lulled her to sleep, and tucked her gently into a borrowed crib. Then Evelyn collapsed onto the bed, mind spinning with anticipation, dread, and a glimmer of hope. She had done it, she had escaped. The real battle, however, was about to begin. Back at the Lockwood estate, chaos ensued when Thomas, Marion, and Richard discovered Evelyn and Clara gone. Thomas frantically dialed Evelyn's phone, only to reach voicemail. He tore through the mansion, demanding answers from the staff. Most of them were clueless. Bianca had staged the departure quietly. Marion's fury was volcanic. She shouted about the embarrassment this would bring upon the family if the media found out. Richard, in contrast, remained silent, his brow furrowed in concern. Thomas stormed into the security office, ordering the guards to check the surveillance cameras. Footage showed Evelyn slipping away with her suitcases, aided by the driver. Thomas recognized the driver as one of the few employees he'd never fully trusted. The sense of betrayal lit a fire in him, but beneath the anger, a flicker of guilt also glimmered. though he quickly suppressed it. "She can't do this," Thomas yelled, slamming a fist onto a table. "We have a baby together. She can't just take off." Marion placed a hand on his shoulder. "You drove her to this, Thomas. But we must do damage control now. We'll contact our attorneys immediately. Don't say anything publicly until we have a strategy." Thomas paced restlessly. "I need to find her. Talk to her. I can fix this." Richard looked away, shaking his head. "Son, you might not be able to fix what you broke." Within hours, the Lockwood lawyers were scouring legal avenues. They prepared to serve Evelyn with a notice demanding she return to the marital home with the child. But in a strategic countermove, Evelyn's newly hired attorney filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity, attaching evidence of Thomas's affairs. A court hearing was set to determine custody and support arrangements. The stage was set for a bitter legal showdown. Thomas sent a barrage of text messages to Evelyn, each more frantic than the last. Some were apologetic, promising change. Others were angry, accusing her of kidnapping Clara. Evelyn's attorney advised her to save all messages, but not to respond. Legally, it was best to maintain silence until the hearing. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn found a small rental apartment above an art supply store, courtesy of Lucy's connections. It was nothing like the mansion, just 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen. The walls were drab, the floors creaked, and the bathroom had leaky pipes. But it was hers, a sanctuary of freedom. She organized the baby's makeshift nursery in the corner of her bedroom, painting the walls with her own colorful murals of ocean waves and bright flowers to give Clara a cheerful environment. Financially, it was tough. She relied on a combination of the small savings her father offered, Lucy's guidance in securing child support, at least in the interim, and her own resourcefulness. Determined not to crumble under the Lockwood shadow, Evelyn began selling small watercolor paintings online. Each sale, while modest, felt like a step toward independence. Then came the day of the preliminary court hearing. Evelyn, dressed in a simple navy blouse and black skirt, her hands trembling as she clutched a file of evidence. Lucy stood beside her, calm and confident. Thomas was already there when she arrived, flanked by a team of expensive attorneys. He looked disheveled, as though sleep had eluded him for days. Their eyes met, and an intense wave of conflicting emotions passed between them: regret, anger, sadness, longing. Evelyn tore her gaze away, focusing on Clara, who was safely at home with a babysitter. During the hearing, Thomas's lawyers argued that Evelyn had left without notice, depriving Thomas of a chance to be a father. They insisted she return with the child to the marital residence, or at least allow Thomas visitation. Lucy countered with proof of repeated infidelity, the fact that Thomas had missed the birth, and an affidavit detailing the emotional distress Evelyn had suffered. She also presented the hidden hotel bills, the phone logs, and statements from Bianca. The judge listened intently. He was an older man with a solemn demeanor. At the end of the session, he ruled for shared custody in principle, but granted Evelyn primary physical custody until the matter could be fully resolved. Thomas was given visitation rights, provided he adhered to strict guidelines. A more thorough trial would be scheduled to determine final arrangements. Evelyn left the courthouse both relieved and anxious. She had secured Clara's primary care, but the fight was far from over. As she stepped outside, Thomas approached, ignoring the protests of his lawyers. She tensed, bracing for an argument. Instead, he looked genuinely remorseful. "Evelyn," he began, "I don't know how things got so out of control. I never meant to push you this far. I love you. I love Clara. I'm sorry." She stared at him, her emotions in turmoil. Part of her wanted to shout, to remind him of the countless nights she cried while pregnant, the betrayal she felt, the heartbreak. Another part felt pity for the man she once adored. but she steeled herself, remembering his repeated lies. "I'm doing what's right for me and our daughter," she said softly, yet firmly. "If you really want what's best for us, respect that." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. She turned and walked away, Lucy by her side. Though the legal battle loomed, Evelyn felt a glimmer of self-empowerment. She was no longer the timid girl from Fairview, overshadowed by the Lockwood fortune. She was a mother fighting for her daughter's well-being and her own dignity. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn settled into a routine that revolved around Clara. She woke up early to feed her daughter, then spent afternoons painting commissions or small pieces she could sell online. At night, after Clara fell asleep, she'd pore over legal documents, preparing for the next phase of the divorce proceedings. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, yet she felt a sense of purpose that had been absent in the gilded halls of the Lockwood mansion. Friends from Fairview, upon hearing of her situation, offered moral support from afar. Some even offered to host her if she ever wanted to return to her hometown. Her father, Henry, called daily, though his voice wavered with the strain of his medical issues. Still, hearing him say, "I'm proud of you," my girl filled her with renewed determination. Meanwhile, Thomas tried to mend at least a sliver of the relationship with his daughter. He attended scheduled visitations in a neutral child-friendly centre monitored by staff to ensure no conflict arose between him and Evelyn. At first, the sight of her husband cooing over Clara was painful to watch. She recalled how he had missed the baby's first moments in the world. Over time, the bitterness lessened slightly. She recognized that, flawed though he was, Thomas did care for Clara, but as for their marriage, Evelyn felt certain there was no resurrection. The damage was irreparable. Surprisingly, Richard Lockwood reached out to Evelyn separately. Over coffee in a small cafe near the courthouse, he offered a genuine apology on behalf of the family. He also gave her a check, a substantial amount that he called a trust for Clara. Evelyn was wary of accepting money from the Lockwoods, fearing it might be used to manipulate or control her. Richard, sensing her hesitation, calmly explained that it wasn't a bribe or hush money. It was simply an attempt to ensure his granddaughter had some financial security. Evelyn eventually deposited it into a trust fund for Clara's education, accessible only when she turned 18. Marion, on the other hand, remained cold and dismissive whenever they crossed paths. She spat words about family loyalty and warned Evelyn that divorcing Thomas would make her an outcast. Evelyn took those words as confirmation that she was doing the right thing. If being an outcast meant reclaiming her dignity, so be it. As the final divorce trial drew near, Evelyn's nerves flared again. She prepared a meticulously documented case of adultery, emotional distress, and financial manipulation. Thomas's lawyers tried to counter by painting Evelyn as impulsive for leaving suddenly, claiming she had deprived Thomas of a chance to rectify his mistakes. But Lucy's legal strategy was solid. She presented evidence that Evelyn had confronted Thomas about the affair, only to be lied to repeatedly. On the day the judge pronounced the final decree, Evelyn felt a swirl of relief, sorrow, and closure. The court granted her sole legal and physical custody of Clara, while giving Thomas structured visitation rights. A fair child support agreement was imposed, along with spousal support for a limited period, enough for Evelyn to get on her feet fully. The judge also admonished Thomas for his conduct, stating that his actions during Evelyn's pregnancy and labor were particularly egregious. Afterwards, outside the courthouse, Thomas approached her one last time. He stood there, hands trembling, tears welling in his eyes. "I know you'll never forgive me," he said quietly, "but I'll try to be a good father to Clara." Evelyn looked at him, her own eyes moist. Memories of their first meeting at the art festival, the day he proposed, The lavish wedding, all the times he made her feel special, flashed through her mind. Then she thought of the betrayal, the loneliness, the heartbreak. "Be there for her," she said. "That's all I ask." He nodded, wiping away a tear, and turned to join his legal team. Evelyn stood rooted for a moment, letting the reality sink in. She was free. Legally, emotionally, and spiritually, she was no longer tied to a marriage that had caused her immeasurable pain. In the months that followed, Evelyn focused on rebuilding her life. She continued to paint, sometimes staying up late to capture the swirl of emotions she had endured: anguish, hope, triumph on canvas. Her online art shop flourished, with clients drawn to the raw emotion emanating from her pieces. Clara blossomed, too, a happy, chubby-cheeked infant who giggled whenever Evelyn brushed paint on her tiny hands to make colourful prints. They created a daily rhythm of quiet, contented living that felt more genuine than any grand banquet at the Lockwood estate. Eventually, Evelyn even found the courage to exhibit her artwork in a small gallery downtown. The show's centerpiece was a painting called The Breaking Dawn, depicting a lone figure standing on a cliff overlooking a turbulent sea. The rising sun spilled gold across the waters, hinting at hope. It sold on opening night. People sometimes asked Evelyn if she missed the wealth and comfort of the Lockwood life. She would smile, thinking of the lonely nights and illusions that once haunted her. "I have all the comfort I need now," she'd say, hugging Clara close. "We're safe, we're free, and that's more precious than any mansion." Betrayed in her most vulnerable hour, Evelyn found an unbreakable strength through heartbreak and pain. Her journey from the lavish Lockwood estate to a modest apartment above an art store proved that genuine love, self-respect, and a child's well-being mean more than polished marble floors and gilded chandeliers. Standing up to a powerful family wasn't simple. It took grit, supportive friendships, and a willingness to face the unknown. But by choosing truth and courage, she reclaimed her life and forged a brighter path for her daughter. If this story moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this dramatic tale with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that delve into the fierce spirit of those who refuse to be broken. Every click helps keep these tales alive. Together, let's spread hope, inspiration, and the reminder that standing up for yourself can open a door to freedom.